Welcome to Golden Bachelor. If you love celebrity news and real entertainment updates, you're in the right place. Nick Viall faces backlash after emotional podcast moment with Austen Kroll. Nick Viall is known for his unfiltered approach on the Viall Files, but a recent episode has sparked intense criticism from listeners. During an interview with Southern Charm star Austen Kroll, a deeply personal subject was unexpectedly brought into the conversation, leaving many fans uncomfortable and upset. Nick and his wife, Natalie Joy, often pride themselves on having open, honest discussions with their guests. While this approach has earned praise in the past, many listeners felt it went too far during this particular episode. What began as a casual chat about reality TV quickly shifted into a sensitive area from Austen's early life, one that viewers felt should have been handled with far more care. Austen appeared visibly surprised by the sudden change in topic, but remained composed throughout the exchange. Still, fans felt the line of questioning became too intrusive and personal, especially given that the subject had little to do with the reason he was invited on the show. Social media reaction was swift. Many listeners expressed frustration, saying the moment felt unnecessary and emotionally careless. Some felt Natalie Joy pushed the conversation too far, while others argued that Nick, as the host, should have redirected the discussion sooner. A few even admitted they stopped listening altogether. Several fans also pointed out that while podcasts thrive on vulnerability, there's a difference between meaningful conversation and crossing personal boundaries. The situation has reignited a broader debate about how far interviewers should go when discussing sensitive life events, especially when guests are caught off guard. So far, Nick Viall has not publicly addressed the backlash. Whether this moment will have a lasting impact on the Viall Files remains to be seen, but it's clear that many listeners felt this episode missed the mark. What did you think of the interview? Honest conversation or a step too far? As the episode continued to circulate online, clips from the Viall Files began spreading across social media platforms, amplifying the backlash. Fans who hadn't even listened to the full interview were reacting strongly to short excerpts, calling the moment uncomfortable, unnecessary, and poorly handled. The reaction quickly turned the interview into one of the most talked-about podcast moments of the week. Many longtime listeners pointed out that the Viall Files has always leaned into deep, emotional conversations, but this felt different. Several fans noted that the topic was introduced abruptly, without warning, and shifted the tone of the interview in a way that felt jarring. Rather than allowing Austen to guide the conversation, critics felt the questioning boxed him into revisiting something he may not have been prepared to discuss. While Austen handled the moment calmly, some listeners felt his body language and pauses spoke volumes. Fans praised him for maintaining composure, especially given how unexpected the topic appeared to be. Others questioned why such a sensitive subject was introduced at all when the interview was meant to focus on his current projects and time on Southern Charm. The criticism didn't stop with fans. Fellow Bravo personalities subtly weighed in by liking or sharing comments that called out the moment, fueling speculation that the situation may have rubbed others in the reality TV world the wrong way. Some suggested the incident could make future guests more hesitant to appear on the podcast without clear boundaries. Meanwhile, Natalie Joy became the focal point of much of the criticism. Listeners accused her of pressing too hard and failing to read the room. At the same time, many stressed that Nick Viall, as the lead host and creator of the podcast, ultimately holds responsibility for steering conversations and protecting his guests. As of now, neither Nick nor Natalie have directly addressed the controversy. Their silence has only added to the discussion, with fans debating whether an acknowledgement or clarification is necessary or if the podcast will simply move forward as usual. The moment has sparked a larger conversation within the podcast and reality TV space. How much is too much when it comes to personal storytelling? And where should hosts draw the line between raw honesty and respect for boundaries? With Southern Charm continuing to air and the Viall Files maintaining a massive audience, this incident may linger longer than expected. Whether it results in changes to the podcast's approach or fades into another controversial moment remains to be seen. As the discussion continued online, fans began revisiting past Viall interviews, questioning whether this moment was an isolated misstep or part of a larger pattern. Some longtime listeners argued that Nick Viall's direct style has always walked a fine line between honesty and discomfort, but this incident felt different because of how personal and unexpected it was. Several commenters pointed out that vulnerability can create powerful moments, but it needs to come with consent and context. In this case, many felt Austen Kroll was not given the chance to prepare emotionally or steer the conversation in a direction he was comfortable with. That lack of control became a central issue for critics. Others focused on the power dynamic of the interview. As a guest, Austen was placed in a situation where pushing back or shutting down the topic could have felt awkward or unprofessional. Fans argued that this is exactly why hosts must be especially cautious when approaching sensitive areas of someone's life, especially when millions are listening. The situation also sparked debate about Natalie Joy's role on the podcast. Some listeners defended her, saying curiosity isn't malicious and that tough conversations can sometimes lead to healing. Still, the majority felt the timing and delivery were off and that the questions lingered longer than necessary. Meanwhile, Austen's calm response earned him widespread respect. Fans praised his maturity, noting that he never appeared defensive or upset, even as the conversation became increasingly uncomfortable. Many said his composure highlighted just how awkward the moment truly was. As clips continued to circulate, speculation grew about whether Nick Viall would address the backlash in a future episode. Some fans believe a brief acknowledgement could help repair trust, while others feel the damage has already been done. A small but vocal group admitted they unsubscribed from the podcast altogether. Industry insiders have also weighed in quietly, suggesting that podcast culture is evolving and audiences are becoming less tolerant of shock value questioning. What once felt raw and real now risks being seen as careless if not handled with empathy. Whether this controversy leads to changes behind the scenes remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. The episode has reignited a critical conversation about boundaries, responsibility, and respect in modern media. And for many listeners, this moment will be remembered not for what was said, but for how it made people feel. As days passed, the controversy refused to die down. Comment sections across YouTube, Instagram, and Reddit continued to fill with heated debate, with many fans saying this moment changed how they viewed the Viall files altogether. Some longtime supporters admitted they felt conflicted, still appreciating the podcast's honesty, but unsettled by how this interview unfolded. A recurring theme in the backlash was trust. Listeners argued that guests come on podcasts expecting tough questions, but not to be blindsided by deeply personal topics unrelated to the main purpose of the interview. For many, this crossed an unspoken line between openness and ambush questioning. Others questioned why the moment wasn't edited more carefully. In the age of polished podcast production, fans wondered whether producers should have stepped in or softened the segment before it aired. That behind-the-scenes silence only fueled speculation that the moment was intentionally left intact for shock value. Meanwhile, conversations began shifting towards how grief is handled in entertainment media. Fans pointed out that while public figures often share personal stories, those moments usually come on their own terms. When that control is taken away, even unintentionally, it can feel deeply uncomfortable for both the guest and the audience. Austen Kroll's reaction continued to draw praise. Many viewers felt his calm, respectful demeanor prevented the moment from escalating further. Others even suggested that his response highlighted just the contrast between emotional maturity and poor judgment in how the topic was approached. The controversy also sparked broader discussions about co-host dynamics. Critics argued that when multiple hosts are involved, there needs to be clearer communication and boundaries, especially when conversations drift into sensitive territory. Without that balance, interviews can quickly spiral.
As for Nick Viall, fans remain divided. Some believe he owes his audience and his guest an acknowledgement or reflection. Others argue that his brand has always been rooted in bold, uncomfortable conversations, and this was simply a risk that didn't land well. Still, the silence surrounding the incident continues to speak loudly. Each new episode released without addressing the backlash has only intensified speculation about whether the podcast will change its approach or double down. In the end, this moment may become a turning point, not just for the Viall files, but for how audiences expect empathy, awareness, and responsibility in modern media.
The question remains, is raw honesty worth it when it comes at the cost of personal boundaries? As the conversation stretched into another week, the incident began to affect how audiences perceived not just the episode, but the podcast's overall direction. Media commentators and pop culture bloggers started referencing the interview as an example of how quickly tone can shift from engaging to uncomfortable when boundaries aren't clearly defined. Some listeners speculated that the moment exposed a larger issue with celebrity podcasts, the pressure to deliver viral clips. In today's attention economy, emotional moments often travel farther than lighthearted ones, and critics questioned whether that pressure played a role in allowing the conversation to go as far as it did. Others turned their attention to audience responsibility. A segment of fans argued that if listeners continue rewarding shocking moments with clicks and shares, creators may feel encouraged to push limits, even when the result feels off. That debate added another layer to the backlash, making it less about one interview and more about media culture as a whole. Behind the scenes, industry watchers wondered whether future guests would request clearer boundaries before appearing on the Viall files. Some suggested that publicists may now insist on pre-interview topic outlines or veto areas that are off-limits, something increasingly common in high-profile podcast appearances. Interestingly, a small portion of listeners defended the episode, saying difficult conversations can open doors to understanding if handled carefully. However, even many of those supporters admitted that the execution mattered, and this moment lacked the sensitivity it required. Austen Kroll, meanwhile, continued promoting Southern charm without referencing the podcast moment directly. His silence was widely interpreted as grace under pressure, further strengthening fan support for him. Several viewers commented that his reaction alone showed why the situation felt unbalanced. As new episodes of the Viall files dropped, fans listened closely for any acknowledgement, however brief. Even a simple reflection, many said, could help rebuild trust. Without it, the controversy lingered like an unresolved chapter. What started as a single interview moment has now become a cautionary tale, one discussed not only among fans, but within the broader entertainment space. It highlighted how quickly public opinion can turn, and how essential empathy is when navigating personal history and public conversations. And as audiences grow more vocal about what feels acceptable, one thing is clear. The line between honesty and overreach has never been thinner, and listeners are watching closely. As the weeks went on, the interview quietly became a reference point whenever discussions about podcast ethics surfaced online. Fans began using the moment as an example of how easily a conversation can cross from curiosity into discomfort when emotional awareness slips, even briefly. Some listeners noted a subtle shift in how they consumed the Viall files afterward. They said they found themselves listening more cautiously, bracing for moments that might feel too personal. That change in audience mindset, critics argued, can be just as damaging as outright backlash, because it erodes the sense of safety that keeps listeners loyal. Others questioned whether Nick Viall's silence was strategic. A few media analysts suggested that addressing the issue could reopen the controversy, while staying quiet allows it to fade naturally. However, fans countered that avoiding the topic risked making the moment feel dismissed rather than acknowledged. The discussion also spilled into conversations about co-host accountability. Many fans emphasized that when multiple voices are involved, it's even more important to have clear signals for when a conversation should slow down or shift direction. Without that internal check, interviews can quickly move beyond what audiences and guests are comfortable with. Meanwhile, support for Austen Kroll continued to grow. Viewers praised his restraint, saying his response showed emotional maturity and professionalism. Some even argued that the incident unintentionally reframed him in a more positive light, earning respect beyond Southern Charm fans. As newer listeners discovered the clip through reaction videos and commentary channels, the story gained a second life. Each repost reignited the debate, introducing the controversy to audiences who had never listened to the podcast before. That ripple effect kept the moment alive far longer than anyone expected. In the end, the episode became more than just a controversial interview. It became a lesson, a reminder that while audiences crave authenticity, they also expect compassion, and that in modern media, how a story is approached often matters more than the story itself. Whether the Viall Files adapts its approach moving forward remains to be seen, but for many listeners, this moment will stand as a defining example of how quickly trust can be tested and how carefully it must be handled once it is. And as the conversation continues, one truth remains clear. When real emotions are involved, audiences don't just listen, they judge. Thanks for watching Golden Bachelor. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next big story.